Hello and welcome to another episode of Something Rotten. We have come to the fourth, not final, because we'll do a Q&A, but kind of the final episode of our Ops season. We've covered Call of Duty Black Ops, and now we've all finished Spec Ops: The Line. And Blake, did you catch that there is actually a secret second connection between these games?
Yeah, they fight clubbed us. Both of them fight clubbed us.
Both times!
Both of them have a little Manhunt 2 in them, if you might say.
Manhunt 2, the originator of What If There Were Two Guys Who Were One Guy.
I will say the ending is the only thing I knew about Spec Ops. So when that happened, I was like, oh, here it is. Though, to its credit, I will say the rest of the game, wholly surprising in ways I did not expect.
I think it's really cool that you had not heard like the game's big things. Because I don't know if I could have like made it this long.
Except the ending. I knew the ending that like you had imagined a lot of it.
But like it's still I think the things that people talk about are generally not like, oh, it was all in your head. You know, it's kind of the other neat shit that we've been covering.
Well, here's my take. Ready to say it. Good game. I liked this one. This is a Blake Hester stamp of approval. I like Spec Ops: The Line.
There it is. Thank you for listening to Something Rotten, everyone. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for joining us, Chris. See you later.
We are joined. I previewed this last week because last week we had on Mike Rugnetta, who I said was one of the originators of the video essay. This week we have on, and I don't want to make him feel old, but one of the longest running names in video essays about video games, Chris Franklin from the channel Errant Signal. Chris, welcome to Something Rotten.
That's right.
Thank you. Hello.
Chris, it's a little, I mean, I think we've talked before because you've been on one of my charity streams, I think, but like I have watched your videos for so long, and I think of you as having like a very video essay voice, but actually it's just your real voice, and when you like start saying hi to us, it's like, oh, that's just him.
It's all an affectation.
Oh, actually, before we start talking about the game, Blake, so often we're on this and we have a lovely guest, and where are they from but New York? And every time you're like, oh, you're in New York? I'm in New York. And for the first time, North Carolinians ganging up on Blake.
No way.
Yep.
Wow. Where in North Carolina?
Basically between Cary, or I'm in Cary, but it's in between Raleigh and Chapel Hill.
Wow.
Cary is like a big, freaky looking area, Blake. If you look at Cary, it's like a giant line. It doesn't make any sense.
You know, we were supposed to have another North Carolinian, but they dropped out.
Yeah, Mr. Beast. Come on.
No. I don't want to say who it is because maybe they don't want their location. They don't want to get doxxed, but we were supposed to have someone from North Carolina.
We have two people on this podcast could likely obtain cookout within less than 10 minutes. Chris, what's your do you have a cookout order?
No, I don't have a specific order. It depends on what my mood is.
There's almost always a corn dog in my tray. That's the most consistent.
That's really great for you all. I'm jealous. There's nowhere to eat in New York, famously. Nothing good. Nothing good to eat here at all.
Chris, having you on is a pleasure, both because I really respect your writing in general, but also because you have a Spec Ops video from 12 years ago. And I feel like it's like there is a certain point in the life of every video game video essayist where they talk about Spec Ops: The Line. For me, it might be coming in the next couple months. But like it's interesting to have. There's been so much ink spilt on this game that I really liked returning to your video as kind of like point zero, you know, of like, let's talk about this near to when it came out and kind of see how the conversation has changed in the 12 years since. Do you have any memory of making that video?
I remember my process was a nightmare. I don't remember anything specifically about the writing process, but I remember how I put videos together back then was sequentially, and that's just, don't do that. That's insane. That's a bad idea. Don't ever do that.
Wait, what do you mean? Say more about that.
Before I was good at what I was doing. I was putting videos together by, writing paragraphs, recording them, editing the video together linearly, straightforward, and then moving on to the next paragraph. And it was...
Oh my gosh.
That's
What?
a nightmare. That's a nightmare. Don't ever do that.
This is
somehow-
like
You have to realize this was 12 years ago, and I had been doing this for like a year, and I had not learned how to do this like a good way yet.
You said it was a nightmare, and somehow hearing your explanation, I was not prepared for how much of a nightmare that really must sound.
This is like when it's like when you like hear about someone who had never been exposed to like math before, and then they made up their own kind of math. That is a fascinating version of just like deciding how to do something in a vacuum.
It was bad. I've learned. I've grown up since. So that's the good news.
But I mean, I think to its credit, like the video itself holds up, and I don't know how, I often have trouble watching old videos of mine just because I get so hung up on like the production elements where I'm just like, oh, the audio sucks in this or whatever. But like in terms of communicating what is interesting about Spec Ops, what you talk about in that video is basically what we're still talking about. The conversation hasn't changed that much.
Has it though? Because like I know the game's undergone a bit of a critical reevaluation in a lot of circles where we've sort of spun around from check out this game doing this amazing thing about this commentary on violence and among other things. But then it sort of swung around in the wake of sad dad games and in the wake of other games. It became the trope of like, don't do this cool thing I'm going to make you do a video game about doing. And I think it had a bit of a critical reevaluation a little bit more negatively. But I think also, I mean, replaying it, I don't know how much of that is just a reactionary response to just being sick of being inundated with sad dad games that are sad about doing all the violence they're going to ask you to do.
Yeah, I think with any game that people talk about how genius it is for too long, there is going to be kind of that reaction of like, everyone's like, come on now. But I think, I mean, what we hit on last week, and I think what really separates this from the sad dad games, is the fact that it's not about being a dad, it's about war. And like for as many feel bad games as there have been, vanishingly few of them are about like American interventionism. And so like that's what makes this one still way more interesting than most of your like, oh man, shouldn't have done that.
Oh, go ahead.
That's what I wanted to say as well. It's like I don't think I would really lump this. I mean, I guess I would kind of lump it in if you're talking about prestige shooters with something like The Last of Us or whatever. But like in terms of its narrative, like I don't see this as that sad dad type thing. I put it up with the military shooter, and when I do that, I'm like Spec Ops is like a clear, like shining example of kind of the military shooter done well, especially because like we talked about in the previous episode. For this, we played fucking Black Ops 1, and my God, what a nightmare.
That was one of the things that struck me coming back to the game this week. I replayed it before we met to talk about it. And it is very much a game of its time, not just in the sense that it's a third-person cover shooter, which is a genre that has kind of fallen out of vogue, I think. Yeah. But also, it is very much in response, not in response to the wars going on in the Middle East, but certainly influenced by them, driven by them in a way that makes it feel more connected to sort of maybe the 2000s than the 2020s.
I was thinking about this actually because I was reading just a bunch of like, one of the interesting things about Spec Ops is there are so many like academic articles in journals about Spec Ops, which is not true of most games. You've got a lot on BioShock and you've got a lot on, whatever. It's like Spec Ops is one of those. And especially written around the time they talk about like how common fighting kind of just generically Arabic enemies was. And I was thinking back and I was like, in the past 10 years, I really think it is almost entirely Russian. If they are like attached to a state, I think that there was sort of a reaction to the like, maybe it's a little problematic that we keep putting these in kind of either specified or unspecified Arabic countries, and instead they made the enemies like a a different kind of white, essentially, to just sidestep the issue. But I don't know if that's, like, I don't know if that bears out if you actually did, like, a survey of all those shooters.
I mean, isn't Call of Duty 2019?
Well,
That's the only recent one that jumps to mind, to your point, though.
And you're fighting Russians in that, too.
Right.
Because
I mean,
it's like Makarov is the big bad guy.
6 Days in Fallujah, if we really want to.
Yeah, but no one has ever talked about that game after its release.
I play it daily, dude. I love it. I'm always popping for my dailies in 6 Days in Fallujah.
Yeah, but I do think I think you're right in that, like, the wars that it's responding to feel Bush era, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a little secret from the last episode that we recorded. I said, hey, let's play up to chapter 8 or up through chapter 8 or something. Perhaps I was a little unclear because you might have noticed that Blake Hester, at the very end of our conversation, where we talked about arguably the game's defining scene where you drop white phosphorus on a bunch of civilians, was mysteriously quiet. It seemed that he had nothing to say, and that's because, Blake, you played up to the beginning of chapter 8 rather than through the end of it.
For the entire history of Something Rotten's run, Jacob has always said, let's play up to this moment. Until Spec Ops episode 1, when he said, let's play up through this moment. So forgive me for playing up to
I
I
didn't want to spoil it to you. Well, now that you have presumably finished the game, played through it, what'd you think of that scene, Blake?
Pretty badass, isn't it? You really get them good.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. No, it was I don't know. It's good for a video game. It's a little hokey in a way, but like also I respect, like it's like it's one of the moments the game goes full horror movie, like when you do the walk through the bodies and you see the charred remains of the mother and daughter that don't really look like charred remains. They look like zombies, frankly. It's a little hokey, but like also a few years ago we had a big discourse over white phosphorus as a kill streak in Call of Duty and whether or not that was like an okay thing to do.
Oh god, that's right. I forgot about that.
And so it's one of those things where it's like when I consider Spec Ops, a game that I think just on its own merits is quite good and enjoyable, and dare I say even fun at certain parts. Taking on its merits, I think the game is good, but when stacked up against its predecessors, even a hokey, or stacked up against, other military shooters, I think even a hokey moment like this does have some power just by nature of like, it's the only one willing to have that conversation and have it in a way that's like trying to say something meaningful / critical, which I think is like important for a military shooter. So yeah, I think those were my two tracks there, because the other side of it is like kind of looks like a zombie. This is kind of just like it's going full 80s horror movie here.
It is full horror movie. Yeah. Chris, having presumably thought about this moment for 12 years and kind of seeing the echoes of it pop up again and again in gaming discourse, like how do you think it works now? Does it still kind of serve the function it intends to?
It does not land with the punch it did in 2012. It's interesting because, like, if you go back and really look at it in context, there really was nothing. 2012 was a long time ago, and having a game that sort of not just made you the villain, but also showed you these horrific scenes in what was otherwise a military shooter felt really raw. And now it feels like a what's the word? A diorama. Like you just sort of walk through this static image of these little tiny statues of burned people, and it doesn't have the emotional weight I think it needs, especially because you move out of there so quickly, right? Like it's invoking some serious heavy stuff, and you are now guilty of war crimes. Walker's now all three of them are now guilty of horrendous murder and death, and it's a video game cutscene. It's got to move you to the next room. You got to get to the next shooty bit. So it really doesn't linger and it doesn't stick around. They do what they can to make that moment matter by calling back to it repeatedly. But I don't know that it lands the way it did land in 2012.
Something that I noted that I did not remember is the entire time you're in that bunker, you do not have control of the character at all. Like, they don't actually let you... What my memory was of it was kind of like, I controlled Walker walking through this, and then you get to the end, and there's a cutscene where you, like, look at the mother and child. But, like, that's not the case. It's from the moment your legs hit the ground, it's a cutscene. And my guess is that part of that was probably, we don't want the players to be able to, like, fuck around in here. We don't want them to, like, you know, shoot or have to prevent them from shooting corpses or be, like, spinning in circles or any of the other stupid things that, like, players can do. But it does... The fact that it's 100% a cutscene really does make the game feel more like it's telling, not showing, in a way where most of the game, I think, is actually pretty good at showing, not telling. You know, like, in general, the game is just letting you think about stuff, but here it's really like, look at it. This is kind of the turning point in the game, both because it is halfway through, but also because it very much marks kind of like a clear delineation in Walker's psyche, where he starts losing his grip on reality a little more. This is probably also the part of the game where we start getting interesting loading screens. And this is not something that we talked about at all in the first section. Blake, did you know about these?
I noticed one of them had a lot of mannequins in it.
I mean, like, the tips.
I've got the list of them here.
Oh,
No,
did you
sorry,
not? You didn't notice these at all?
It's Twitter time when the loading screen pops up. What are you talking about?
Well, there you go. This subversion did not work on Blake. Okay, Chris, read some from, like, early in the game, just to, like, set kind of the base level for it.
If the radio man now speaks for the 33rd, then what happened to Conrad? Rumors claim... Oh, yeah, stuff like that. Story stuff.
Yeah, so it was like, interesting plot thought. Okay, keep going.
That was loading screen, like, 41. I'm going to read to you now loading screens 92 and 93 back to back. Loading screen tip 92. Cognitive dissonance is an uncomfortable feeling caused by holding two conflicting ideas simultaneously. Loading screen 93. You are still a good person. I just love that those are right next to each other.
What the fuck?
I mean, Blake, this is... I'm sorry, maybe I should have told you to pay attention to these, but, like... You know, I just kind of thought they would set up, because it's like, and early in the game, the loading screen tips are like, you should take cover if you're taking, or like, throw a grenade to kill enemies. You know, like, it's just kind of like, whatever. They've got all of them. But yeah, then there are so many of these, especially in the end, which I also think, like, the end gets noticeably harder, and so you are dying significantly more, which means you're seeing these more. I think the classic is, the U.S. military does not condone the killing of unarmed combatants, but this isn't real, so why should you care? And going along with that, what is... Actually, I need to find this. Chris, do you have the killing is harmless one?
Harmless. Oh, yeah. To kill for yourself is murder. To kill for your government is heroic. To kill for entertainment is harmless.
So this is another one of the things that the game does that is incredibly on the nose, but at the same time, it's like, can you think of something else that is doing this in that way?
It is extremely on the nose, to the point where I think if it was done any less tactfully, it would be obnoxious. But the way it slowly ratchets up, I think, is what really makes it work. If you'll indulge me one more reading of some of them.
Oh, keep going.
This is way back early in the game. White phosphorus is a common allotrope used in many types of munitions. It can set fire to cloth, fuel, ammunition, and flesh. That's a little weird to define it that way, but then later on another similar loading screen that comes up later, white phosphorus is a common allotrope used in your slaughter at the gate. It can set fire to soldiers and the innocent civilians they are trying to help. Just like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going.
No, that was all, just those two. But like the way it like just takes the one that it offered you early in the game, that's just like, hey, this is what white phosphorus is, in case you didn't know, and the way it cranks it up to be like, you're a bad person for doing the stuff you did, and you really should just stop. Makes it work really, really well.
Yeah. Do you feel like a hero yet is another one. And I also think that kind of the other thing with these screens that it does well is like the art on them becomes more and more surreal, where like the beginning, again, this is the kind of like starts off looking like kind of a boring ass video game to get your guard down and then hits you with it, where like the first several are basically just concept art. You know, they're just kind of like, here's an environment, here's whatever. And then like by the end, you have like the one of the ones on the last level that I think I've seen the most, just because I die a lot on the last level, is Adam's like covered in blood on this blue background with like birds flying away, and it's like really surreal and kind of, you know, artistic, and makes you, it doesn't really match the tone of what's happening. You know, it is this kind of like beautiful scene, and then later you have you know, you have Walker like with his arms out like Christ being rained on, and it really, again, it goes places, and it's in some ways like, and because I've heard people talk about the loading screens for years, it feels a little obvious, but it's like, when you're playing it and you notice this happening for the first time, it really is like a what the fuck is going on kind of feeling.
Jacob, I feel like for 2 episodes we've been trying to like preface everything we've said with like, it's kind of on the nose, but like I really think we both just like really like this game, and we don't want to come out and say it full, like with our full chest. I think this game fucking rocks, and I think these loading screens go hard. I didn't even notice them, but hearing you all describe them, I'm like, I don't care how on the nose it is. I think it's like cool that a video game is like doing this.
Did either of you get any of the haunted loading screens? Yes, those are also really rad.
Those look, mark my words. Those are going to make it into an essay. Thanks for listening to Something Rotten, Jacob Geller viewers. But like, yeah, there are like 2 specific moments in the game where if you die, you get like a video file instead of a loading screen. And the weirdest part is, if you die again, they don't happen. Like, it is literally like 1 time per level you can get these, and then you're like, what was that? Let me try to recreate that, and you can't, because it doesn't repeat. It is really weird.
Yeah, I'm glad I was recording my playthrough so I could cite those. I was like, did I imagine that? It really starts messing with you in some interesting ways. I don't know if we want to skip ahead to some of the other horror things they do.
Go
if we
ahead,
want to,
yeah.
Well, just the mannequin room is another great example where they start messing with you.
Yeah.
For those who haven't played it, basically, Lugo and Walker, or Lugo and Adams, are across the hall in a mall, and you need to get to them because they're under fire, and you have to pass through this basically department store with a bunch of mannequins in it. But the power starts cutting out, and so the lights turn on and off and on and off and on and off. And every time the lights change, a different mannequin is the heavy guard coming in to shoot at you is where one of the mannequins was, and where he was is now a mannequin, and he just teleports all over like that. And so you don't really know what's real or where you need to be shooting. And it's just one room. It's not a whole mechanic set. It's not something they do again. It's just this one intense little moment, and it's really, really cool.
Yeah, Blake, did you? I assume you noticed that.
Yeah, I saw that one. Don't worry. Yeah, I think this game's cool, man.
I think, yeah, one of the things that I like about that moment is it never, I mean, I guess you have this like giant hallucination sequence, but like, I like that it's basically like a room-long horror sequence that is not repeated. You know, that it's not like, oh, and now for the rest of the game, Walker's gonna see mannequins, and you're gonna understand that it's like this gameplay mechanic. You know, that they kind of do it, and it hits, and then they get out of there. And similarly, there's a part where you take a really long zip line, and you, like, land on an enemy soldier, and you kick him, but then you see him, and it's Adams, and he's yelling, like, Walker, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? But at the same time is taking out his gun, and so you like, you know, execute him, and you do one of the, like, very extreme, like, you know, basically break his skull open executions, and then And then, oh, it's not Adams, it's a normal soldier, and Adams, zip lines next to you and is like, what the fuck was going on in here? But again, it's like, they don't pull that. I guess they pull it twice, because then later there is Lugo as the heavy, which is...
It's a little different there because Lugo's dead at that point. I don't know if we want to get into that spoiler, but yeah.
Yeah, and then that's one of the haunted loading screen sections. But it is... I really like the surreality, and I think in the kind of academic conversations about the game that I've read, at least like the journal published ones, that's not really touched on as much. I think what we remember is the white phosphorus, the oh, you're supposed to be the good guy but you're the bad guy, like that, the sort of questions of agency and military shooters and stuff. And I like that the game has this magical realism almost happening at the same time. That's like not just like Walker experiencing it, but like the player experiencing it is a really cool additional layer on that. And there is a reading of that we'll get into later, but I don't want to get there quite yet. Blake, here's an interesting thing. When talking about that white phosphorus bit, Walt Williams? Is that the writer?
Yes, not Walt Whitman.
Yeah, okay. I was like, one of these is like a famous literature person. Yeah. Walt Williams talks repeatedly about no Russian. That it is like a very explicit...
Not Death from Above?
No, actually. I mean, okay. Death from Above is kind of the implied section. Sure. But no, it is no Russian. And part of it is what he kind of defines as like the cowardice of the no Russian mission in not making you pull the trigger. That this is the famous Modern Warfare 2 mission where you like you're in with a bunch of Russian terrorists in an airport and they gun down a bunch of civilians in front of you, right. And you can, but you don't have to, and there are no consequences if you don't.
I totally forgot. Holy shit. I totally forgot you didn't have to pull the trigger. That's really interesting. Jacob.
Yes.
We've recorded a lot of ads about Nebula in our day.
That's true.
How fast do you think you can go through all the bullet points?
1.
Start now.
Episodes a week early. 2. Bonus episodes. 3. Support the show. 4. There's a bunch of other cool stuff on Nebula. 5. It helps Blake and I get money. Is that it?
6. Say where they freaking
6. Go to nebula.tv/somethingrotten.
That's pretty good. I could have done it faster, and I'll prove it next season. Yeah, I guess to that point, at some point, like I started playing the game where any moment I read as like this is a decision, I would always do what would be the like bad choice. Just to see what would happen. I mean, granted, you don't have a choice with the white phosphorus, you have to do it, but like I really started to play into that version of the Walker character where it's like now none of them are coming to me, so if you all can remember some of the choices.
There's the decision where 2 people are hanging is like one of the earliest
I think ones. I actually did the good decision there. I killed the guy who was not trying to get water for his family.
That's the good decision?
What?
I just walked away.
Oh yeah, well I did the good bad decision.
Okay, never mind. Not the good decision then.
Yeah. What are some of the other decisions?
There's the one where you have to shoot or not shoot the civilians when they're...
Oh right. Yeah. That's a great example. I immediately pulled the trigger just to be like, what will happen at the end of my game if I like fully lean into like this is who Walker is and this is where his mental space is.
You get achievements for doing that, and I still think that's weird.
The achievements are fucked up. Yeah, we talked about that with Mike last week of being like, hey, 70 headshots, great job, here's an achievement.
So I'm playing my roommate's version who has a bunch of the achievements, so I wasn't really seeing achievements pop because I was playing on his profile.
You can see how fucked up AJ is by looking at what achievements he has.
Yeah, but the civilian scene is like a really good example where I was like, okay, yes, I'm going to like very consciously I see what the game is doing and I'm going to lean as far into the bad option as possible.
how did you handle rigs, shooting or not shooting rigs? Because I feel like both are kind of, I don't know.
Oh yeah, with it when
That's
you
a
crash
very,
the
very
water
indi-
truck and when you can let the guy burn to
I
death
walked
or
away.
not.
I walked
Yeah.
away. I walked away, so he burned to death. Yeah.
I walked away because I felt that was the crueler option, which is what he deserved. Like, it really was I hate this guy so fucking much. I want him to burn. What I think is interesting is in those decisions. The first time I played the game, specifically, this is going to be non-sequential, which is fine. Unlike how Chris used to make his video essays. So late in the game, Lugo dies. He is hung by a bunch of these civilian refugees that are still in Dubai, and then they are all going to attack you, and Adams is yelling, like, basically, let me shoot them. And the first time that I played this, I did not realize that this was a choice. Like, I just shot them because that's what the game was telling me to do. And I think that's probably the experience of a lot of players. And then I learned, actually, you can shoot in the air, which scares them off, or you can melee someone, which kind of disperses the crowd. And, like, that was an interesting moment because usually the game's decisions are false. You know, that, like, with the hanging people, you learn that they were two dead bodies. But even before that, like, you never really save anyone. Or, like, earlier in the game where you're trying to decide to save either the civilians or, like, the other army guy that you're going after, the army guy dies either way. You know, like, you can never truly save him. But the civilians one is interesting because you can, if we are taking those as literal events, actually kill them or not, which is like a choice that the game presents you. Chris, you're looking skeptical.
Well, I in a sense, you may have already killed them, given that this is after you've destroyed their water, and that a big theme is that Dubai is doomed at this point.
Yes.
But yes, you can choose not to kill them then and there. So I don't know if that counts as saving them, but you certainly can spare them temporarily.
Yeah, and I think that was... I just remember that because that was a moment of not guilt, but I felt gross about myself when I learned that there were other options because of how quickly I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna shoot them. You know, like, it was an interesting moment because I just didn't realize that it was a choice.
It also feels like a more, I hate keeping going back to the achievements, but it does feel like a bit of a pivotal choice. Because the game is called Spec Ops: The Line, and doing the right thing there gives you the achievement "A Line Held," and I think that feels like the only true choice in the game, almost in a sense, where like that is where you prove to yourself that you always have a choice, even though the game presents it as if it is a false choice. Whereas before it was always giving you false choices, and you thought you had agency because you're a video game player. Here suddenly they're giving you this like, you have to get out of there, you have to act right now. Your only weapon is a gun. How do you do it? You just shoot people, and that's just sort of how people respond to video games. And I think having that be sort of the pivotal actual choice about whether or not to hurt people is an interesting one.
I read, actually, in your original video, Chris, you link two pieces of writing, and one is on Grantland by Tom Bissell, called 13 Ways of Looking at a Shooter. And the first part of it is he's describing a demo for Splinter Cell Blacklist, in which you break into, you're Sam Fisher in the Middle East, you break into a tent, you like kill two guys and like wound another one. And I've never played Splinter Cell Blacklist, so reading this was insane. It's like you stab him, and then the game tells you to rotate your analog stick to twist the knife in him to get information. And then he says, the gamer, let's see, the screaming gentleman gives Sam the info he needs, and suddenly it's moral choice time, for Sam has to choose whether to kill or knock out his freshly tortured victim. Let's review a moral choice after an interactive torture sequence. And so I think that it is hilarious that the achievement would be called A Line Held after you have done all the heinous shit that you have done in the game up until that point.
That is a valid point. I think it speaks to the dissonance inherent to the game. I mean, again, it is a game that wants to criticize both video game violence and real violence, but you get achievements for popping headshots. So
Yeah, that is kind of the thing that I've been trying to figure out on this most recent playthrough is in developer interviews, they do not talk about real war very much. Like they really talk about their focus being on other war games, that it's about military shooters. And I've been trying to figure out how much of that is just, how much is the game only critiquing military shooters? How much is that maybe them being cautious with what they say because people freak out when you talk about this kind of thing? And how much of the commentary on actual military stuff is almost unintentional, like side effects of critiquing the military video game? Like where does the game land? And I think that there's very intentional critique in here, because like it's not a critique of video games to say that the CIA wanted to kill everyone in the city to cover up the abuses that the US military did. Like that's not a video game targeted critique. That is like very specifically kind of a war in general. And so it's just, yeah, it's been interesting to figure out like how much is this game about war versus war video games?
I have to imagine that video games are its primary target. That's both what the developers talk about, and that's what drives much of the way it works as a game. But you're right. There's undeniably a lot of commentary about war, and specifically the way the American Empire wages war. I mean, the title screen is the upside down American flag with the Star Spangled Banner, Jimi Hendrix's cover playing. Like it's hard to escape the reality of, and again, like we were saying, it does feel very much tied up, even though it's in this like fictionalized version of Dubai. Feels tied up in the sort of the wars of the 2000s, the Bush era wars.
I do feel like it's also interested, and this is maybe a bit of ludo narrative cohesion. Is that the word? Ludo
Harmony?
narrative
Yeah.
resonance. In in individual soldiers, like agency or lack thereof in a war zone, and like obviously that's going to play out as video game mechanics. But I mean, wars are nothing but a bunch of decisions made by various people up a chain of command, and I think like this game is interested in how the individual reacts to like a war gone wrong. And as the player, like you are who makes those decisions.
Yeah, and it is such a player-focused game that I feel like there's not really, we don't do a lot of thinking about Lugo and Adams as individuals, but it is something to think about, to be like, hey, should Lugo have fucking put a bullet in Walker's head before that white phosphorus scene? Like what is their responsibility? And I think that sometimes one of the slightly weird reveals of the end and of Conrad being entirely like a construct of Walker is like, how much were Lugo and Adams going along with a like visibly insane person versus just like someone who thought they were making the right decisions and ended up hurting a lot of people? And it's like Walker clearly thinks that he has no choice at every stage, even while he's making choices. But also, like, the other people in your squad are never even really, they kind of pay lip service to like they're not happy about it, but they don't ever meaningfully go against the choices that you are making. And I wonder if that's also a commentary or just kind of the nature of the game being first and foremost like about the player.
No, you go.
I was just going to say I think that's an interesting take, because I don't know. I feel like there's a version of this game that could exist where after, like, because the way they reveal that Conrad isn't real at the end is basically just a bunch of flashbacks to the radio didn't have batteries and a bunch of other like, obvious tells that Conrad isn't real. But I feel like there's maybe a version of this where in a more modern game, you would flash back to a playable section with Lugo and Adams and be playable as one of them, where maybe they are expressing their concerns about what's going on with Walker. But you're right, that takes the focus off of it being you are player character hero guy, and it recenters it around sort of Walker's own downfall. And I think it really depends on like, what are you trying to accomplish with this game? Is it skewering video game tropes and video game violence, in which case obviously I think they made the right choice. But if you really did want to sort of like examine these greater systems of control and accountability, you needed to have that scene with like Lugo and Adams like having a quiet moment while Walker's up ahead being like, we can't, having to decide whether or not to push back.
Yeah, because I think what this game doesn't have, it's implied, but it is not explicitly stated, is an institutional perspective. Like we do get that. It generally seems like the American military coming into Dubai has not been a good thing, and it's like that is okay. That is kind of like the American military writ large, but like because it's so focused on the player and thus Walker, it is really a story about like individuals. And I think one of the things that I don't hate, but I don't love about the Conrad being a Tyler Durden ending is because it is just so in on Walker's psyche in a way that for me makes it feel less like it is about the actions of a military writ large deciding to kill civilians. That like when civilians die in war zones, sometimes it is the decision of like one dude going rogue, but often, very often, it's like the whole apparatus has decided that. Like there are a lot of people who decide on like what the protocols for drone strikes are, and they all decide that they're okay with civilians dying, which is a different thing than what we see when Walker kills a bunch of people with white phosphorus. It's kind of the one guy going rogue versus the army makes bad decisions sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to be like extremely generous, like you could argue that Walker is just a product of the institution that like created him, and that's why he is like okay with those sacrifices. But I don't know, maybe I'm like giving him too much grace at that point, or I don't know.
I don't think that's giving it too much grace though, because it is like, he's certainly a product of military shooters, like
For
maybe
sure,
maybe
yeah.
the institutional critique is just the institution of Call of Duty rather than like the American military. And like that's still an institution worth critiquing.
And they're kind of one and the same in some ways.
I mean, I think there's even a read you could say that this game is not super critical of the U.S. Army. It's critical of the CIA, because the literal read of this is that Conrad goes in there, tries to save people, tries to march them out, fails utterly. Thousands of people die, like 1,500 people die on his attempt to leave. He kills himself. The 33rd is stuck there, trying to care for these people as best they can. And then the CIA comes and tries to basically bury the whole operation. And so it's critical of the CIA, but not the army in a weird way. And Walker is just the tool with which the CIA executes.
Yeah, another thing that I was kind of struggling with this time is I do think that a lot of the game, that plot that you just described, is supposed to be pretty unclear. That like, because like we only find out the CIA's motivations as what's his name? Griggs is dying. Like we don't really know what the CIA is doing there until then. And for a lot of times, it is just like you feel caught in the middle of these two parties of which you're not a part of either. He's not CIA and he's not 33rd. And they both seem to have gone crazy, and maybe you're the only sane one. But like, again, I guess it's like, how much does the game want you to think about that CIA plot line is something that I'm not sure of, because it's pretty easy to miss, and like most of the stuff that the game's doing is not about, like the loading screens aren't about the CIA. The loading screens are about Walker's cognitive dissonance. So it's just, yeah, I was thinking a lot about like what has been repeated ad nauseum about this game and what hasn't. And like the CIA stuff is something that I basically completely forgot since the last time I played it. And I think that speaks to the level of importance it's given in the game. So the first big mission that we do here, we meet this guy named Griggs, who is introduced like a Call of Duty character. He like kills people in a cool way with a revolver. He's, he's not literally calling them pansy asses, but it feels like that's like what he's saying. And he spells out maybe the most just explicitly evil thing that anyone like decides to do in the game, which is he is just going to take all of Dubai's water in an attempt to starve out the 33rd. Right? That's his stated motivation? And all the water is in the Dubai aquarium, and some of Walker's squad has reservations, but they do it, and it is, and maybe this is actually a time to talk about the gameplay, like a pretty fun level to go through that aquarium and shoot everyone, and the music's really going, and it's like an interesting level design. Blake, you talked about this being like a fun game at times.
Yeah, man, I like it.
Yeah.
I had a great time. Hell yeah, dude. I'm picking up snipers off the ground, fucking getting headshots, going back to my fucking assault rifles, giving out orders to my dudes, flashbanging. I was having a great time. I fucking loved it. As Ludo narrative resonance, I was fucking crushing it out there in Dubai. Oh my god. I don't know. I kind of miss third person stop and pop shooters. You know, it was just scratching a very nostalgic itch for me. I think I also just like the added like mechanical wrinkle of giving out the orders to Lugo and the other one,
Adams.
I think that's a fun little touch, and it's very satisfying when Lugo just headshots someone that's like a mile away for you. Yeah, I was having a good time. I think I just miss Gears of War likes. We don't get them too much anymore, so it's fun to play through one.
Yeah, we talked about last week how an interesting way that this game has aged is that when it came out, everyone kind of rolled their eyes and was like, "Oh, another one of these." And now it's a throwback, and now we don't get these kind of games
What
as
was
much.
the last big stop and pop third person shooter? I mean, the Star Wars
Last
Outlaws.
of Us 2?
I guess. Yeah, but that's not really stop and pop. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot more
I'm thinking
kind
like
of stealth going on.
I'm thinking more like an Uncharted type.
But even
Gears of War
the
type.
Uncharteds have like made so much effort to get away from that, to like make Drake like way more mobile. Because yeah, it's like if you think about the 360 PS3 generation, you had all three Gears of Wars, you had all three Mass Effects, you had the first three Uncharteds, and all of those are just stop and pop shooters, and then a bunch of like imitators of all of those.
I mean, Gears of War 5?
Yeah,
maybe?
that's still basically stop and pop. You're like
Yeah.
more active than in the first three games, but that's probably the last one.
They got new Gears of War coming out, man. Y'all remember that? That's what a
eBay.
blessed life we live. Spec Ops.
Spec Ops. You're going through this aquarium. I did write down. Last week we talked about the murals, all of the different pieces of art. There is in this just a big shark with legs, which I just read the Junji Ito manga Gyo, which is just about a bunch of sharks with legs that come and eat people, and I was like, yo, I don't know, I don't quite get the maybe the metaphor of the shark with legs in the aquarium, but I liked it. And you so you go down as this pitched battle. Like I said, the music is really amping up in this, and I do feel like it's an effort to kind of make you forget maybe that you're in an aquarium to steal the entire city's water. And then you have this like,
dude, I forgot they have like kind of a bitchin' ass riff.
Yeah, no, it's like it's a very cool sounding guitar. Yeah. And then you get down to the water, and you have this like mounted turret section where you have a grenade launcher with infinite ammo, and you go through, you're shooting people, And then Riggs does the thing that I guess you kind of always expected him to do, and they're like backed into a corner, and so he just like flips the trucks over rather than, I mean, I don't even know what the plan was. Like, it seems like this was the only way it could have possibly turned out, is he fucks up the whole water for everyone in the city. But following this, I think, is civilians don't show up much in this game, and it's very targeted when they do. You are either incinerating them or they are killing Lugo. But this, I feel like, is maybe the best use, because all of these trucks have flipped over and you regain consciousness, and there are just a bunch of people like trying to fill up like bowls and containers and stuff out of the leaking trucks. And it is a real, like, man, this sucks. This is so bad. Then
what do you want me to add, Jake?
I don't know.
They're gonna die of dehydration. Yeah, bro. I'm with you.
And Conrad is coming in kind of over the radio, though, as we learn at the end, is just like hallucinated in Walker's head, and he's just like, everyone on the city is on a 3-day timer. You know, that like this is it. Which. Ugh. And then you find Riggs, and he's under the he's flipped, his cab is flipped over, he's being crushed, it's on fire, he's going to burn, and he gives you his revolver and says, hey, kill me. And you can decide to do that or let him burn to death, and I let that fucker burn to death.
We don't need no water,
Chris.
But we do need water. That's the whole problem.
Right.
I can't remember. I've played through this game so many times. I've done both.
What are you gonna say, Blake?
I didn't feel like a badass a lot of times in this game. There were like a few moments, like honestly, like riding on the back of the truck with the grenade launcher. Like, I felt like a badass, and it's like, all right, the game can have a few moments. Because for a lot of the firefights, I was just like, this is the loudest thing I've ever heard. They were fun, but I didn't feel like I was like Soap McTavish. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, this is hell, and I'm just like fucking gritting my teeth and fucking fighting through it. I do think like where the game succeeds, and it feels weird to say this because it's like, it's such a tricky line of like what is like trauma porn, you know, is like in the moments where shit is fucked, and just like there's this badass grenade launcher moment, and then it's immediately slammed up against you watching people get the last drops of water they will have in their life, and you like having to reckon with that as a player, and obviously Walker as a character. I think like more than probably any other military shooter, which is to say this would be the only one ever, I like considered like what it would mean for like Walker or Lugo or Adams to go home after this, and like by extension what it means for just a member of the military to go home after anything. Like, obviously this is a video game, it's heightened to some extent, but like, I don't know, it just like, it was like a consideration I had never paid to a video game before, to actually like sit and think about like who these characters represent, what they stand for. I don't think I have any grand takeaway from it, but it was like an interesting moment kind of right here where I was like, well, yeah, like ostensibly these people would want to go home, and they would have to like reckon with all of this shit. Granted, they don't go home. My guy got real dead at the end. But I don't think I have anything smarter to say about it. But like, we've played how many fucking Call of Duty games for this show? I've never sat and thought like, what if Soap goes home? How will he live with him? You know?
And, I was going to say, and the game brings this up, right? Because it brings up when Lugo and Adams start fighting, they start talking about having to carry this with them the rest of their lives. Adams, when you're separated from Lugo, stops Walker and is like, I don't think Lugo's going to make it. And Walker's like, we'll get him, we'll save him. He's like, that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
They expressly are concerned with the lasting impact of this stuff, even if you do make it out, what is the impact of this stuff?
Yeah, well, and I also think that in terms of like thinking about the characters, I think that because this game gives you so many unavoidably awful moral moments, you know, that like there is no other choice than doing the white phosphorus thing. when you were given choices, I was really thinking kind of like, if I'm trying to do the right thing, who am I doing that as? Because like in the scene with Lugo being hanged, there is virtually no doubt in my mind that Walker is opening fire on civilians. That it's just like everything in the game has kind of led him up to that moment. And so like if I'm not shooting them, am I doing that because like me, Jacob, wants to feel good about myself, even though it's kind of like breaking with the character that I'm playing? And it's actually why at the end, and we'll get to this, like, you basically have the choice to kill yourself or kill the acknowledgement of your delusion. Basically, like, the choice to kind of keep living with yourself, you have to, like, make the conscious choice to stay crazy a little bit. Yeah, I guess. And I, whenever I get to that moment, I'm like, I don't think Walker is killing himself. Like, I think that he is so in denial that he's just going to keep doing this, even though, like, as a person morally, I'm like, I think Walker deserves to die. But, like, it just doesn't... It doesn't seem like that's how he's going down based on kind of what I was thinking about his character.
Did you watch Apocalypse Now yet, Jacob?
Not yet. I am planning to before our thing, but
I
haven't seen it.
We'll have to circle back to that in the bonus episode then, because there's an interesting parallel you could draw between that idea and that movie.
Yeah, Chris, how do you, like, when you get to these like moral choices, or like, are you gonna kill or save the civilian or the... Oh, I guess you said you walked away from that thing where you have to, like, choose one of the hanging people. But, like, are you trying to be good, or are you just thinking about, like, Walker?
In what context? Like, in Spec Ops: The Line specifically?
Yes.
Okay. Generally, I guess I try to do what's good, but also there is that role-playing element, so I don't know, is I guess it leaves that line between you and Walker ambiguous. And I think that's part of the game's charm, is that the line between Walker, the guy who is descending into this really dark place, and you, the person who's controlling him doing that, there's a porousness there. There's like, you bleed into one another. So I don't know. I've never really thought about it, I guess. I know the first time through, I tried to make what I thought were the right decisions, but that was 12 years ago. I can't really remember. But like that was my attempt, was trying to make the right choice and often failing.
Do you then generally in video games? I mean, I am the total, like, trying to make the Paragon choice in most games that I'm playing. I've often thought it would be more interesting if I, like, didn't, but, like, I have a hard time doing, like, an evil playthrough of any game the first way through.
Yeah, I'm a similar way. I tend to play the goody two shoes unless it's a robust role playing system that allows for something more than just like give everybody hugs or murder everybody. Like if that's the choice, I'll go with give everybody hugs every time. But if it's a nuanced role playing system where I can sort of express an interesting viewpoint in the game space, then I might do that instead.
Yeah, if it's Disco Elysium, you try to give everyone hugs, and the game is like, you fucking lib, what are you doing? There are a couple specific moments that I want to call out. Conrad, you swear at him, and he says, "Hey, keep it clean. This is rated E for everyone's thirsty," which is like, all right, that's a video game. We're playing a video game.
Towards the final hour of this game, I thought Conrad got a bit much.
A bit too video gamey.
He takes a turn to like just full stupid, and I was like, all right.
He turns into a psychomantis in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he says, what caused all this violence? Is it the video games? I think it's the video games.
And there's a joke about him swallowing his gum that's real dumb.
However, here's a line of Conrad's that I liked. He says, "Hey, what are the scariest words in the English language? We're Delta Force, and we're here to save you." Which I think is both. It's an interesting, obviously, it's a critique of the player. I do think it's a critique of the military. And it's also like that is a Reagan quote, basically. Like Reagan's famous joke. Yes, Blake's dog sitting behind him. Ronald Reagan's famous like bit was like, "Hey, what are the scariest words in the English language? We're the government, and we're here to help." And so like it is doing this kind of like riff on that, which I'm not sure if I
Reagan said it?
Yeah.
That's very funny.
Funny guy. I'm not sure exactly what I make of it being like a Reagan malphorism, but it's kind of interesting. Here's another weird fourth wall-ish bit. There's a part where you capture an enemy soldier, and you're torturing him, and it is like, oh, has Walker gone too far? And the soldier is saying, like, oh, I'm a soldier, I'm part of the 33rd, my service number is 867530, and then they cut him off, and I was like, what is that doing here?
Yeah.
867530.
It's the real dumb man's version of hiding 451 in your game.
Which now I think 451 might be the dumb guy's version of hiding 450. I think I played a Call of Duty game that had 451 in it.
No, it's cool. It's cool.
There are some really good. There's a level where you start on the rooftops, and like the scenery is just popping off. Like the level of Dubai-ness that it's getting, where you've got all these buildings and like the clouds are way under you. Incredibly cool. We talked about Dubai a lot last time, but in terms of just on raw aesthetics, hard to think of like a more interesting and varied place to to set a game. And then we meet Radio Man. Radio Man is another character that I've never quite known how to like fit into my framework of the game.
Feels to me like there's a lot of this game that feels very much of the 2000s in the sense that it's a cover shooter. It's got all these references to Afghanistan and Iraq, but also there's this like undercurrent of Vietnam that runs through the whole game. And the Radio Man to me always struck me as one of those kind of stock characters. The sort of like, he's not a hippie because he's in the army, but he's, Hawaiian shirt guy just doing all the LCD, or he's probably doing LSD, but he's got all the psychedelic stuff in his lobby. He's just really chill. He strikes me as one of those stock characters, and I don't know what he's doing here in this game other than being yet another 70s reference to things like Apocalypse Now.
And it is worth pointing out that he's not just an army guy. He is a journalist who was embedded with the 33rd. Like,
that's a specific Apocalypse Now reference.
Yeah.
That's like an explicit callback to a character in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, so I guess my question here is like, is it just they sure spend a lot of time on him for him being just a reference to Apocalypse Now?
Well, the radio thing is not a reference. It's the journalist who is embedded. But the crazy journalist in a foreign country type thing who's decided to stay there. The radio thing, I don't really know. Like, that was that specifically felt very 2000s video game.
They kind of just needed a guy talking to you over a earpiece.
And he just had to be a little he reminded me of almost like a character from like Dead Island or Dying Light, where it's this shit sucks, but there's a goofy man who talks to you, and he's like wearing a Hawaiian shirt. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree, and I think it is actually maybe the most interesting part of him. I do think is like your last confrontation with him, where Lugo goes up, and he's having like an interestingly normal conversation where he's like, hey man, you like put all this radio stuff together? Like, how'd you get it beyond the storm wall? And the, radio guy is like talking, and they're kind of talking shop. And then like in the middle of that conversation, Lugo just shoots him in the head. And it is actually an interesting moment of someone other than you acting in a really kind of unexpectedly violent character, where by the end of the game we are used to Walker pulling this kind of shit, but like seeing Lugo do it, I think is enforcing like they are all really damaged by this. Like none of them, especially Lugo, who's supposed to be like the fun jokester guy, is just kind of like gone and is, you know, executing this guy basically.
I think like Lugo has the most interesting character arc in the entire game, even more so than Walker. I think Walker's fairly predictable by the end of it. It's Manhunt too. But yeah, I like Lugo's turn to just like real Shakespearean tragedy going on in this man's head. Like, I like that there's no like gray about him. He's just fucked beyond belief from this whole thing.
Yeah, it is, you know, and in some ways, yeah, he is. I think tragic is a good way of putting it, because he has like the farthest to fall. You know, he kind of seems the most like a guy who could go back and be normal at the beginning of the game, at least.
And he also starts as your like anchor of normalcy, right? Like he's the only thing that might make you chuckle through the opening hours of this game, and by the end it's like you've lost even that. So it's like he's falling far in that way too. And
that he's, I mean, at the beginning of the game, he's the translator who's maybe trying to get you to not shoot those guys. You know, he's the only one who tries to negotiate in like the whole game. And so for him to just cold-blooded execute a journalist, even though the journalist had gone crazy, is kind of a shocking moment. Then we get another one of the like, oh boy, Walker bad things where you run away to a helicopter that's on a roof. It's got a big old minigun on it. Everyone is on board the helicopter, and they're like, we're gonna get away. And Walker says, no, take us back around. I want to see what this thing can do. And you blow apart this roof to like an inconceivable level, including like there's a big glass tower on it where the radio guy was, and you like crash it into the building itself, and it is just so like it looks like every other turret section, except the game makes very explicit that you could just leave because they're not on helicopters. Like you could just go, but instead you're staying there and killing everyone on the roof.
There's a famous story about John Romero's company after id Software, the name of which escapes me.
Ion Storm?
Ion Storm. The developer Daikatana, they bought a office at the top of this Austin, Texas skyscraper, and it had these huge glass windows, and the greenhouse effect was such that it was very stupid to put a company that relied on computers in this office, and they would have to cover their computers with, I think, like black tarps and blankets so that the sun would not fucking melt their motherboards and shit. Anyway, I was thinking about that.
That's really funny. I didn't know that story.
Giant glass tower with all his nearly sand destroyed radio equipment.
Yeah.
Probably melting slowly but surely in there. That's for all my Ion Storm heads out there.
That's
Y'all
right.
know that story.
Blake Hester is going to make you his bitch.
That's right.
Then we get a moment of the game that has had a surprising amount of ink spilled about it, which is we get back to the prologue of the game, because if you remember, the game starts with a helicopter turret sequence, and Walker says, wait, this isn't right, we've been here before, in this like very, very fourth wall breaking moment. There are a couple ways to take this. Blake, did you have like a reaction to hearing that?
I didn't know what to make of it. I'll be honest. I went full dumb brain. I was like,
Chris, did you have a reading?
I not when I first heard it. It was very confusing. I think because it's very subtle about what it's trying to, or what it might be trying to do here. I don't know if you want to broach that yet or not, but
I think now is the time to talk about it, because this is not my favorite read on the game, but it is a popular one, and so I think we should talk about it. There has been maybe the game's director and maybe Walt Williams, I kind of mix up who's saying what in these interviews, but has said that there is a notable difference between when the game fades to black and when it fades to white. That the game has two kinds of fades, and they say that the fade to white is more of a imagined or hallucinatory or like not totally reliable fade between those. That combines then with Walker seemingly having deja vu in this helicopter to something that's already happened before, to lead a lot of people, if you're watching YouTube video essays on this, it comes up, to postulate that Walker dies in the helicopter crash. The entire game has been a flashback, a Jacob's Ladder scenario, if you will, of like him remembering what has happened prior to dying in the helicopter crash, and then everything post helicopter crash is Walker fully just in hell, living out hell for the things that he has done prior to the helicopter. It is kind of a dead the whole time, or at least dead a significant amount of the time reading, which I tend to not like, but it is more supported by the game's text than most of those readings. That's what I got.
I don't like it.
I don't like it either, but also there's a lot of it in the text, unfortunately.
It's
go ahead.
No, you keep talking.
Well, I was just going to say, there's, first of all, the fact that the 33rd is called the Damned. They're the Damned 33rd.
Yep.
The fact that the big crime happens at the gates of hell. Immediately after that, I don't know if you notice this, immediately after you do the white phosphorus scene, you go into a building for a firefight, like the very next room. It has got a literal statue of a fallen angel. The fact that the game does nothing but have you drop down and down and down and down and down, and there's never ever going up. Just all of these things that loosely imply, if not literal hell, this is a metaphorical hell. And I think trying to argue that it's a literal hell, I don't like that read. But there is a lot of it in the text.
Yeah, I think the metaphorical hell I am fine with, and I think that's great, and like weaving in those themes. But I guess what I don't like is when people often use "he's dead the whole time" as kind of the end of their analysis, where they're like, I got it, I solved it, he's dead the whole time. And it's like, okay, but why? What does that mean? And to this game's credit, if you are taking that reading, there is at least more to do with that than, like, I don't know, all the Rugrats are dead except for Angelica, or like, you know, some other creepypasta that you would read.
I don't know. I like the idea of it as a metaphorical hell, and I can get behind that reading. I generally don't like the "he was dead the whole time" twist or even idea. Jacob's Ladder being an exception just because it is explicit about it, like it tells you at the end of the movie, and it allows you to recontextualize the rest of the film as the viewer. So I don't like the idea of this being like, maybe, wink, wink, like... but as a metaphorical hell, like I think that reading totally works and is like fair and good and cool. But I don't like the idea that he died in this helicopter crash.
I don't know what you do with the ending if that's the case. Yeah. Like, what does the end of the game mean? That final choice mean if he's already in hell, having to live with his delusion or kill himself, but he's dead.
Yeah, I feel like it basically, yes. If you decide that he is literally dead, then everything that happens, it's like, why would you have a moral choice to kill civilians or not if you're in hell? You know, like, what does it matter? So yeah, it's why in many interviews the developers kind of have been like, I don't know, you know, like maybe it does mean this. I always prefer for someone to be like, I know exactly what it means to me, I'm not going to say it to you. That might be the case, and they're just kind of being coy in interviews. I you know, I like to think that, the artist had a purpose and they didn't just leave it vague because like they didn't have a clear idea of what they were doing. But it is something to talk about, and it does certainly play in with the thing that happens immediately after this helicopter crash, which is this giant crazy hallucination of like the Burj Dubai as the Eye of Sauron, essentially, like spitting out flames from either side, and Conrad, yelling that you had, how many people have you killed, etc., etc.
You call it the Burj Dubai?
It's the Burj Khalifa, but it was originally called the Burj Dubai, Blake, including probably when this game was made.
Fan. I'm a fake fan.
It's like the Sears Willis Tower.
Terrible. This feels terrible. Oh, I was trying to call you out, and I ended up not knowing my history.
In the game, it is not either. It's just a tall building, but it is clearly like Dubai is defined by a tall building.
No, I owe you an apology. I didn't know it was called the Burj Dubai originally.
I was still using an outdated name. So you have this giant hallucination sequence. It's another part that I think it is very visually striking. I think I like the game better, despite what I said about liking all the surreal stuff. I do think I like the game better when it's not being quite as explicit about its messaging. And this, again, it feels a little too much just like, I know, he's bad. I don't know if I need it, but I also don't think I would take it out because I do really like it as a piece of imagery. It's just kind of, I'm like neutral on it.
I think to your point, I totally forgot about these. There's like 2 of them, right? I totally forgot about them until you just brought them up. Like, they did not stick with me.
It reminds me of the Metal Gear Solid 3 bit where you walk through and have all the people you killed walk by you, except here it's just like the 3 pre-scripted characters or so that you allowed to die.
Yeah, it's not as it just feels kind of like, I think in the like Metal Gear Solid thing, I think there's like a much more interesting like little thing that the game will sometimes do. Like if you let Riggs burn to death, like graffiti and statues change after him, and like I think that's really cool. And there are these kind of, I think of the interesting things that the early Metal Gear Solid games do as, yeah, they got a lot of like big stuff that's really noticeable, but they also have a lot of like tiny stuff that the game would be basically the same if it wasn't in there, but it's way cooler cumulatively that they like thought about all these little things. And Spec Ops does have a lot of those, of just like little things that you can see that, like, again, if you kill Riggs, then the statues, one of them is basically like pointing at the other one with a gun finger, and if you let him burn to death, both of the statues look like they're like cracked with, kind of magma instead.
Yeah, I noticed them. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's cool. And then there are others. I mean, like we said, the haunted loading screens are there. There are other graffiti changes that happen. Like there are just, it's like the game doesn't go up a review point because it has those things in there, but like it is 12 years later, you can watch like all the little details in Spec Ops and like see things that you hadn't noticed and be like, that's cool. That it is cool that they put that level of thought into it. There is, I think it's worth saying again, when you are rescuing Adams and after you rescue Adams, the game gets significantly harder. I started dying a lot more. Part of this is maybe because you don't have Lugo to be on your team, so you can't. Blake, as someone who's using the like tactics constantly, did you miss him when you couldn't use him to snipe people and stuff?
Yes, he was a noticeable vacancy in my heart.
And this is also the peak of the game's vocal aggression, where it is weird words like, so as we talked about in the first episode, you start off a very kind of military clinical of like tango down, whatever, and by the end you're screaming like got the fucker. And I think the game works better when they're unbelievably aggressive. Like I think that like the kind of tenor of the firefights feels way more desperate when they're screaming like that, which is an interesting thing where the obvious point is just like they progressively lose humanity as they play through the game, and they stop seeing their enemies as like people and start seeing them as kind of demons that they're killing or whatever. But also in terms of just a military shooter, it's interesting that like I like the more aggressive feedback, like it felt in the same way that like having huge spouts of gore is like good visual feedback for when you're shooting someone because you can tell that you hit them. Them screaming, it was almost like gamically, I was like, yeah, this feels like where it should be, which was a strange feeling to have because it's like at the height of their kind of loss of soul or whatever.
I think I just generally like that in games. I don't know. I feel like that's how people. I just felt like that's how real people would react even before they have had a full schizophrenic break with reality because they dropped white phosphorus on 40 families. I just think that's probably you would be in a firefight. Yeah, I like it.
I can't remember because it's been so long since I played them, but isn't that generally the tone of like all of the Gears of War when you're in combat is yelling back and forth?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's not like a franticness to them.
Yeah, I would say there is, and the difference that I would put between this and Gears of War, but also this and Call of Duty, is it's not like bro-y. There's kind of like the ooh-rah, and then there's like making jokes like in Gears of War. And like this is not, you don't feel a lot of camaraderie, in Spec Ops. It is really just like anger. But I think maybe because, and here's the thing, it's like, in this game, in all of these shooting games, you are killing people, and maybe what I'm reacting to is, like, it feels weird to kill people so clinically, that, like, the anger makes more sense for that act, which is inherently violent and horrible. Like, I don't like when someone's, like, super cool and chill when they do it. I don't know, it's interesting. So there is this big final push. It's like almost literally everyone left in the 33rd is trying to keep you away from the Burj Khalifa. You go with Adams. You kill pretty much everyone. There's a moment that you seem pinned down by a helicopter, and interestingly, Walker seems like he is ready to give up. And then Adams is like, you are not, like, we made it. He kind of says, like, we made it this far, you can't give up. But he also is kind of like, I'm not letting myself live through this. Like, he really, he's up there screaming, shoot me. And eventually he, like, pushes you off this tower you're in. And basically, like, gives everyone no choice but to start shooting at him, it seems, and you never see him again. Like, that is basically his death scene, is this off-screen blaze of glory. And like Lugo, it's tragic. Like, it is just a fully broken man, basically, doing the equivalent of suicide by cop or whatever with the 33rd, just being like, this is the only way I'm gonna let myself go out. And then you walk into the Burj Khalifa, and there are big old aquariums, and everyone there salutes you. And then you walk into Conrad's office. So Blake, how much did you know? You said you kind of knew this, but like, in what respect?
I more or less knew that everything that happened in the game, I should assume to some extent, was perhaps a hallucination.
Okay.
Like, I knew it had the Fight Club at the end. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So when this happened, I was like, oh, okay, there it is. What I didn't know is you can end the game by killing yourself. I had no clue. The actual, like, final moment of the game. But
yeah, there are a couple final moments of the game that we can talk about.
But as to the Fight Clubness of it, I suppose, like, I did have that in mind basically the whole playthrough of the game.
And like, did it work for you? We talked about in Black Ops, the twist is like meaningless almost, or like it doesn't have any like metaphorical meaning that like you and Reznov are the same person. It's just like who cares? Like why would that matter? Did this work?
I think it's fine. I also think like the game works without it.
Yeah.
And it maybe makes some moments more interesting. Like if you can just assume like, oh, maybe I didn't open fire on a bunch of innocent people, or like, oh, I did shoot one of those hanging guys instead of just walking away. Like, I don't know, maybe those moments become more interesting if they weren't actually two hanging corpses and your two squad mates weren't like, oh, who's he talking to? Or there weren't batteries in the walkie-talkie. I don't know. I didn't hate it as much as obligatory Manhunt 2 mention or Black Ops. But
Chris, we keep referencing this. Do you know that in the end of... Have you ever played the horrible game Manhunt 2?
I've only played the original Manhunt.
that's a good game. That's a good one.
We kind of like Manhunt. Manhunt 2, one of the worst games either of us have ever played. And it has you can see it coming from a mile away. You and this other guy are like the same guy ending.
Yeah.
Do you... How much mileage do you get out of the you are Conrad twist, or Conrad is dead the whole time twist?
I think it works well enough, I guess. I don't see how you could do it otherwise, because the whole game is basically Apocalypse Now / Heart of Darkness, but you can't have your Colonel Kurtz, like, you can't have a Colonel Kurtz boss fight. You know what I mean? Like, the video game can't end with you and Colonel Kurtz shooting off in a big third-person action sequence. That doesn't fit the tone, it doesn't fit the themes, and it just doesn't work. So it chooses to end with an anticlimax that further implicates you at fault for everything that's going on by saying that you are basically the person who invented the reason to do the horrible things. So you kept saying that you had no choice, you were forced by Conrad. Conrad is a voice in your head, you did it yourself. And I think to that end it works thematically. As like a fun plot reveal, it's pretty tropey. But again, I don't know how else you complete this objective of getting to a Colonel Kurtz style character and having that end in a video game.
Yeah, I think I largely agree. Of the parts of the game where they are throwing things in your face, I think this works the best for me. I don't think I need all the flashbacks, but, like, they're okay, you know? And you do see things that you did not see when you were playing it. You know, it's like, when you first do that radio scene, there is no cutscene that shows that, like, there aren't batteries in it. And so you were kind of learning new information there. I do really like the visual layout of it. That basically what happens is, like, first you walk up and Conrad is painting a giant like oil painting of the white phosphorus scene with the dead mother and child. So they bring that imagery back. But then you walk out on this balcony, you see that he's dead, and then the game kind of walks you into this like big mirror where you're still behind the shoulder as Walker, but you're seeing Walker reflected in the mirror, and Walker's character model is fucked up beyond belief. I mean, like, halfway through the game, he gets half burned. He's basically missing an ear. He looks like shit. And then Conrad is in the mirror, and your final decision, I like, is it doesn't say, like, press X to shoot self, press Y to shoot Conrad. Like, it is literally just who you aim at. And if you aim at yourself, you see Walker do the animation where he then, like, points the gun at his face.
I just didn't move the controller, and Conrad shot me.
Oh, okay.
I didn't actually go, like, I didn't know you aimed at yourself. Like, I just was like, yeah.
Yeah, so there are a couple ways that this scene can end up. Conrad said he's going to count to 5 and then shoot you, or count down from 5. You can just let him fire, and if that happens, you die. You can also aim the gun at yourself, shoot yourself, and you also die. I'm not sure if it's the same cutscene or if it's slightly different. But then the other thing that you can do is, of course, shoot Conrad. And if you do that, the mirror shatters. It is this really nice looking animation. He says it takes a strong man to deny what's right in front of him, which is a cool line. And then there are 3 more potential endings after that. So like there's a lot of ways that this game can end. So Blake, you let Conrad shoot you, right?
Yes.
How did you feel about that ending? Was it like, this feels like the way it should end?
Yeah, he needed a James Sunderland. I guess I guess maybe there's a more explicit suicide ending in the game, but I just felt like once Walker had the knowledge of the truth, like there was just no other option for him in that moment. So yeah.
I think, honestly, thinking about this in context of Silent Hill 2 is a pretty interesting way of thinking about the end.
I usually am thinking about video games in context.
Hey, aren't we all? Chris, do you have a preferred ending? You've said you've played it many times, so I assume you've seen most of the options.
I feel like letting Conrad shoot you is the best ending. That's the one I typically go with, especially because the other endings are a little bit weird, kind of. Go ahead.
They are weird. There's one weird that I really like, and then 2 that are different. So if you shoot Conrad, if you don't let yourself die, the game flashes forward a bit. The storm has subsided. You walk out of the bottom of the Burj Khalifa, bandaged up, wearing a cool ass, probably Conrad's jacket or something, holding an AA-12, the like automatic shotgun. And there's a new military squadron there, and they're like, "We're here to rescue you," or they're like, "Holy shit, someone's alive!" And in that moment, you have a couple options. They're kind of like, "Is this guy okay? Is he okay?" And you can either drop your weapon and go with them, or you can start fighting them and die, or you can successfully fight off all of them. And all 3 of those have different endings. My favorite of these is you drop your weapon, they take you into a Jeep, you drive away, they say, "How did you survive out there?" And Walker says, "Who says I did?" Which I think is an interesting ending, both in that, like, it works with a metaphorical hell. It is also kind of a horror game ending of, like, the fact that he just gets to go home, I think is maybe the most fucked up outcome, but in a way that I find pretty interesting. And if you want to think that he's dead the whole time, that's another way that you can take it. This time, I fought and killed all of them, and it is weird. And it's a hard fight, and you only get one chance at it, because if you die, the game just ends there with basically them being like, "I guess he went crazy." But if you fight all of them off, you take one of the soldiers' radios and hold it up, and you say, "Hey, gentlemen, welcome to Dubai." And so basically it's like he has fully become the Conrad that he was picturing in his head. So Chris, you were saying they all feel a little weird.
Yeah, I mean, the one where you die is pretty straightforward. The one where you get picked up is its own nightmare, and then Welcome to Dubai is this sort of like self-manifestation, and I guess they all work. I mean, it's one of the few games that has multiple endings, and all of them could just as easily be canon as any other, which I do applaud the game for, because usually it's, there's the good ending, the bad ending, and the worst ending.
The dog ending.
Yeah, but they're all good ending. Well, good in the sense that they all are sort of thematically cohesive. Any one of them could apply, and it doesn't really like feel inappropriate. It doesn't feel like, oh, I got the crappy ending. It's they're all valid potential ends to this story.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that they don't feel cheap, and it doesn't feel like they. This is also a game that kind of has, even though you have choices throughout, it's kind of a game that's like, okay, it's linear the whole way through, and then pick how you want to end, which I often think doesn't work. But like you're saying, it's like in this case, you don't get to pick an end where he's fine, and so like I think that's why it works, is that it's all just the kind of like, what kind of hell should he keep going through? And that's Spec Ops: The Line. It is a hell of a game. I think I was expecting to have soured on it a little more replaying it. And to my surprise, I haven't. I really think it still pretty much works as well as it did when it came out.
Yeah, I like it more than I thought I would by quite a bit, and I'm a little surprised at the I'm a little surprised that I like it this much. I really, knowing me, I thought I was just gonna come down kind of hard on this one, because I think I'm like on its surface, I thought I was like, I'm kind of over the games as a narrative on violence or whatever, but I think this game actually has like cool and unique things to say despite its age, and does it in cool and interesting ways, and it helps that there are no other military shooters that are trying this shit. So
yeah, we got enough post-apocalyptic meditations on violence. Okay, do some pre-apocalyptic ones.
USA.
Chris, you do a great job of spotlighting indie titles on your channel. We were kind of referencing last week, like, okay, well, obviously there are a lot of indie games that have done interesting things with this sort of commentary, and what's rare about this is that it's AAA. But in the time since, I have been kind of trying to think of, like, indie games about the military that are critical, and like this War of Mine, like I said last week, is kind of an obvious answer, but it's not really doing a similar thing, because it's just about how hard it is to be like a civilian in a war zone. Can you think of others? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here.
Offhand, I can't. There's not. I mean, Umurangi Generation kind of has a bit of a critical view of sort of the UN, but that's not really the army. That's.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of like. I mean, part of it is I think so few indie games engage directly with sort of. If you're an indie game and you're doing something that involves the army or shooting and stuff, you're probably not trying to do sort of more of the artsy narrative game thing, if that makes any sense. So I don't think there's a huge overlap of like, hey, I'm going to go indie and make a shooter, and it's a shooter that says the army sucks. I don't think that happens very often. I'm struggling to think.
Yeah, and it's like you certainly have your other war critical series. Ace Combat is critical of war. I mean, Metal Gear Solid, for all its like goofiness, is fundamentally a very anti-war series. But like, war as a target is much wider and easier than like the military and the players' complicity in it, which is, I think, what makes this more interesting.
What about the Vietnam levels in Hotline Miami 2?
Blake, those are not in Vietnam. Those are in Hawaii.
Now, who possibly could remember the plot of Hotline Miami 2?
Hey, I made a video about how I don't get it, and a bunch of people are still weirdly mad about it. But like, those are bizarrely not Vietnam levels. But I do think I don't know. It's Hotline Miami 2. It's really hard to parse exactly what that game is saying.
Hotline Miami 1 is $9.99 on Steam right now. I've never played that game with a mouse and keyboard, so I think I gotta buy it.
That's the way to play it. Also,
I beat
good
the
game.
shit out of that game on Switch too, so I'm already a pro at Hotline Miami. With mouse and keyboard, I'll be unstoppable.
You can be like that lady in The Last of Us 2 who was playing Hotline Miami on her PS Vita.
On her Vita. Yeah, that's right. Wow, remember that?
Is that a PS Vita? Chris, thank you so much for coming on Something Rotten. It's been a delight to have you here. I could not recommend, if any of our listeners somehow are not already watching Errant Signal, please do. Is there anything else that you want to plug or point people towards?
No, I'm good. Just thank you for having me.
Blake and I are making prayer hands. Stay tuned for both our listener Q&A. If you have questions or comments about what we said, you can send it in to somethingrottenpodcast@gmail.com. Sign up for Nebula to hear our bonus episode where I will, among other things, be watching Apocalypse Now for the first time, and then
I read a fucking book.
Blake read a book that he is ready to talk about. And that's it. Thanks for listening, everyone. And just remember, killing is harmless. There's no problems with it. Listen to your loading screens.